So for this video, I just wanted to talk about something very interesting, a kind of a why it's important episode. I do have a series on that, and it's where I discuss very important things to the gaming industry and explain why it's important to know these things. So today is kind of based around why it's important that we actually own the games we emulate. And there's various arguments and reasons for that. But before I get into the video, I did want to point out something funny that someone said to me, that people have commented that they thought my glasses looked like Captain Falcon's glasses. Hey man, if you think so, leave me a comment down in the section below. Other than that, I think they're pretty cool. I got them on sale and that's why I bought them. Just as kind of something nice for the videos that I do. Essentially, there's another thing I wanted to talk about. In this video, I've done a little bit of 4K shooting mixed with 1080p. So I've blended it together, and I think I'll bring you a really nice video viewing experience here. And I tried to make it as nice as possible. This was due in part to my camera phone, but also Aukey has sent me a very nice tiny 4K camera that I used in recording this video, and it's all due to them. So I will be putting a link down in the description below where you can go ahead and check out Aukey's products. I highly recommend them, and in the next few videos I'll be promoting them. Again, I don't make any money from this promotion, so it really is just what they sent me. So what I'm going to be doing is running through some NES games, and I'm going to be showing you that I do in fact own a lot of these NES games. Though this isn't my whole collection on display, just some of the more prevalent games that I often play. So join me down in the basement, and I'll see you guys there in 3, 2, 1, and with the magic of editing. So essentially what I wanted to talk about here was the NES Classic being an example of why it's important that you actually own the games that you emulate. So I'm emulating the NES Classic here on an HP monitor just due to the simple fact that I really like it. I do this in the basement. It's pretty simple setup. All you need is an HDMI cord, an NES Classic, and you need the controller, obviously. But there's one major problem. There's a reason why I do this in the basement, and that's the cord length. Sitting here with 2 chairs, it works out really great for me. I can play games, and I don't really feel like I'm going to have to stretch the cord or get extension cords or anything. This is set up in the basement just because of room constraints, but it works out very well. Again, the monitor has built-in speakers, and it cuts on very quickly. It's a very crisp and beautiful image, and it works out very well. As you can see, this is a modified NES Classic, and it's very important to realize that, yes, I do indeed own plenty of these games. But first, let's take a look here. Just to be sure there is no harm, no foul, I'm not playing with you. This is a real legit modified NES Classic to where you can play essentially any games you want on it. You saw me go through the list. The games work, and they're just loaded onto the software and hardware that it actually uses. There's not much necessary in making this work, and within seconds you're out of the game. So a lot of people would say this is absolutely amazing. Why would you want any classic hardware? Why would you even want to deal with stuff like this, you know? But I say, hey, thumbs up to it, man. Let's go ahead and explain here. So there are aftermarket systems. This is just one I happen to have in here because I was going to be testing it. This is the Retro Duo. It's a very nice system to get. It allows you to plug in Super Nintendo controllers and get video out of your console, a very much higher resolution rate that you would normally not receive with an NES or SNES back in the day, unless you were pretty lucky. These were during the times where you were using coaxial connections. Now with that, you can use the SNES controller, which is a plus for many people. I do also have an NES itself, and it serves me pretty well, but again, the point here is to show off some of the games that I have. And they're all pretty nice. There's no questioning that these games are really awesome. But while I'm showing off these games, I do want to talk in the background here and discuss in detail why it's important to actually own the games that you're emulating, to know the experience and the pluses and the minuses to emulating a console like this. One, let me begin by saying that even though I do own most of these games, and if not at one point in time have bought them, throughout life you lose games. There's no questioning that. You sell them and things like that. Companies stop providing these games, and the companies themselves really don't care if they get pirated and emulated because they're not making money off them. But the point is that there is something to actually owning these physical games. Now, in our current age, where microtransactions and digital content is more important than ever, it's really important to realize that if you're emulating the software, you should at the very least have an acknowledgement that there is a physical copy of those games out there. You wouldn't believe how many people don't even take a second look at what the game actually looked like or the front art. All they've ever seen is the title screen from emulating them, and that's pretty sad. You have to think, man, we went off of some of this title art here, and you can see that, I mean, some of the title art, you can see it, look, right on the cartridge. It's beautiful. It's amazing. Some of it is just excellent for the NES game itself. It got you hyped up for the game, and it was great. Some of it's very silly and looks exactly like the game would look as well. And some of it is just, well, I mean, yeah, that's the game's art. Alright, that's exactly what we're going to be getting into when we play this game. So some of it will leave you flabbergasted as well as to, hey, what's this game about? It's about a Robo Warrior. It's about baseball. Alright, so sweet, awesome, right? But these were back in the day where you didn't have the internet all around. And these are important features to be very aware of, because when you emulate games, you don't necessarily get this unless you physically Google that game cartridge, that game box, and actually see it with your own two eyes. Now, a lot of questions on legalities come up with emulation and things of that nature, but there's no questioning that I do own plenty of these games, and I absolutely love them. This is only a fraction of my collection. There's tons of games that I have upstairs in my main living room. There's tons of PC games I have. There's games that I have in bins all of downstairs. Some of these games are excellent, amazing games that people just absolutely love. They're wonderful games, and these are games that people may never be able to play either without emulation. Not only for the simple fact that in one's country, if the Nintendo wasn't available at the time, look, let's just say, for example, you lived in Afghanistan. For whatever reason, you might have a small mind and think, well, who cares about them? But that's pretty pathetic to think. At the end of the day, if you lived in a foreign country that never had this game console come to your country, but you've heard about it, it's legendary. Many games that you do have available to you right now, they are built off of these games, and you've never gotten to play these games. How would you play them? Well, you would emulate them. So, at one point in time, there is a great argument for emulation. Not only for the simple fact that you would like to not have to do the legendarily crappy things of back in the day. Check it out here. It's wonderful that I have these games, and I can pull out the cartridges, and I can plug them into the NES, and I press the power button, and generally speaking, the NES might boot up. But then again, it might not. I might have to blow into the cartridge. I might have to use Q-tips. I might have to replace the contact points on the NES. Because this is the stuff that we had to suffer with when we had cartridges like this. So on one hand, while emulation is great and can introduce things to a lot of people who didn't happen to have this stuff back in the day, on the other hand, it's really, really crappy to have to be constrained to things like very basic resolutions, mono and not stereo support on the console itself, cartridges that don't want to work, and things of that nature. Yes, you definitely are getting the authentic experience. There's some great games, and it's pretty fun to pull out some cartridges and play from time to time. But at the end of the day, would you really want to be doing this as your main console, as your main system? Or would you like the convenience of just simply pressing a power button and having the entire NES library available to you at the time? Again, I implore anyone who is really into piracy to please consider purchasing the games that you do end up pirating, because I absolutely love the games that I have, and I own physical copies of my games. I love them. And like I said, this is just a fraction of my collection, just a few games I decided to pull out that I happened to set aside for this video. And I kept them into a little box and got them all organized out. I have some of the most legendary NES games there are as a physical copy. A lot of people look at people who play games and record footage and think, oh, you're just emulating, you're just emulating that footage, man. That you don't really have that game. You've never played that physical game, and that's really not the case with me. I love NES games with a fervent passion that can't be replaced by any other game console except the Super Nintendo, in which case I absolutely love the Super Nintendo as well. And so, in showing off these games, it makes me kind of a little happier that I'm able to show this stuff to my fans and explain the importance of also physically owning the copies of the games versus just emulating them. These are things that a lot of people will probably never enjoy past a certain age, just due to the fact that they are not available anymore. They're limited. So you can press the button, you can fire up the game, and have a good time. You can play through some Mario Brothers and just really, really go at it. Have a good time, man. And that will only take you a couple seconds. From cold boot on my monitor here, I can be playing Super Mario Brothers within under 30 seconds. Can I say that about the original Nintendo? Well, maybe if the game was in there and I didn't have to fool with it, maybe. But at the same time, if there was for any reason I had to move the game around, I had to replace the game, like it's just not in the NES, I'd probably end up having to clean the cartridge or something. I'd have to mess with it, and it would be a rather unfortunate set of problems I would have to sort through, and I would have to go through to get the game to simply work. Not only that, but there is quality issues. As I stated before, a gimped resolution does not take into context that it's not a clear picture. What you're seeing on the monitor right now is HDMI. This is HD. It might be scaled up, but you're noticing that there's not any noise in the background. That's because these aren't AV cables. This is, again, HDMI. I know I'm saying that, but I really do have to emphasize it because, a lot of people don't seem to realize that just because you plug in AV cables doesn't mean you're going to get a clear and fair signal. A lot of the time with AV cables, there is noise, especially in old, unshielded, cheap AV cables. And on top of that, if you're playing on something like a CRT, an old CRT, you're going to get things like scan lines as well, which a lot of people, they don't have a preference to that. Now, again, with this, you have the beautiful option of deselecting the game and instantly booting up the entire NES library. You want to play some Metroid out of nowhere? Fine, that's something that you can do, and you don't have to mess with a cartridge, you don't have to blow in it, and this supports saves, where a lot of other games, they really didn't. So why this matters, why this is important, is that people not only need to know about physical cartridges, but the reasons behind why you might want to own physical copies of the games that you emulate as well. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a game over.